Shalom from the holy city of Yerushalayim. Today, the second day of the month of Teshuvah, the month of Elul, corresponding to the 5th of September, 2016. And I would like to wish all our dear friends and students in the United States of America a happy holiday today on Labor Day. Those of you who are with me, we are the true laborers laboring in the Torah. And today we have most fascinating studies, both in Tanakh, in the Hebrew text of Daniel, and also in our holy Mishnah as we embark on a new tractate, the new Masechta of Makois. I would like to establish that everybody is able to hear me and see me. Please, those of you who are signed in on the Azamra website, or through you who are signed into the Bet Midrash application of instant messaging, please let me know that you can both hear me and see me. And just as soon as I do hear from you, then I'll be ready to go, God willing, straight into our studies today of Daniel. So just waiting now for notification. Thank you, Adonit. Thank you for informing me that you can now hear me and see me. Baruch Hashem. So let us go forward. B'Shem Hashem na'aseh v'natzliach. In the name of Hashem, let us do and let us be successful. Shalom. Today, the second day of the month of Elul of this year of Redemption, 5,776, as we come up to the Yomim Noraim, the high holidays, corresponding to the 5th of September 2016. And we continue now with our studies of the 10th chapter of Daniel, having gone through the chapter with our examination of the more evident meaning of the text and some of the more simple commentaries. I would like to go more deeply into the commentary of Rabbi Meir Leivush ben Yechiel Michel, known as the Malbim. Before I do that, I would like to just make a general comment on understanding an aspect of our chapter, which I believe can be understood very helpfully with the Kabbalistic concept of tzimtzum. Tzimtzum referring to the contraction of the divine light, the infinite light, its contraction to something within boundaries of space-time and being, the contraction of divinity into the material world, involving a withholding of the infinite aspect of divine light in order for the finite material to receive the revelation. We do see this in this chapter, which is all about a group of companions, three of them prophets, Zechariah, Malachi, and Haggai, all of whom prophesied at the beginning of the Second Temple. Indeed, Haggai and Zechariah actually prophesied that now was the time to rebuild. They were with their companion Daniel. Daniel saw the vision. The prophets did not, but they were frightened out of their wits and all went to hide, and Daniel alone was left, and he too was shattered on the physical level by the first revelation of the angel, of the Malach, which parallels the revelation of the angel Gabriel to Ezekiel in his vision of the coming destruction of Jerusalem, which had now passed by the time of Daniel, and Daniel now sees the vision in, as I mentioned yesterday, a more terrifying way than any other prophet saw it, because Daniel saw such a detailed depiction of what's going to happen in the future. And we see that as Daniel first sees the angel as described in verses 5 onwards from chapter 10 of Daniel, as Daniel sees the angel and he's consumed by trembling, and all his friends run away, and Daniel himself, his whole soul in verse 8 is turned into a destroyer. He has no strength left. So Daniel then hears the voice of the angel in verse 9 when he is in a state of slumber. We see how successively the terrifying presence of the angel, defying all the bounds of the physical world as we know it, steadily comes closer and closer to Daniel. And in verse 8 we see that in verse 10 already, after he's heard the voice, he says that there's a hand which is moving him to his hands and knees, and then the angel in verse 11 begins speaking to Daniel in a way that Daniel can hear and understand. And by the angel's comment in verse 12, do not fear, Daniel, it's clear that Daniel was in a state of absolute fear and terror, but the angel is steadily coming down to his level in order to reassure him and in order to give him the message. So as the chapter proceeds and the angel explains why he has come, that he has come to reveal all this future of the end of days to Daniel, we find already in verse 16, behold, there he is in the image of people, the sons of Adam. In other words, the angel has come down to a level even nearer to the level of Daniel, Kidemus b'nei Adam. It is clear from our commentaries that this is all one and the same angel, but steadily he's coming down level by level in order to talk to Daniel and in order to reveal himself to him. And this is what gives Daniel the strength to begin to answer and to say that he is ready to hear this prophecy. So with that introduction as to understanding the successive coming down of the influence of the angel by the attribute of tzimtzum, to understanding that, let us now go into the chapter, and I would like to go into the commentary of Malbim on this chapter, and to follow from the beginning, comment by comment, what Malbim has to say. Well, he points out that Daniel had seen in the third year of Koresh, Cyrus of Persia, how at the beginning of Koresh ascending to the throne, they had given the green light to building the temple, and now Daniel sees that this has not come about, and he is trying to seek understanding, says the Malbim on verse 1, that as Daniel describes how he this word comes to him, and he sees in the Hebrew text Tzovo Godol, this great long period that he's trying to understand. The closing words of verse 1 indicate, according to Daniel, that now in this vision Daniel is going to be given an understanding of all of the previous visions that he had through the earlier part of the book, all of which contain two matters: davar, a word, and mar'eh, an image. That is to say, says Malbim, this includes the davar, the word that he heard in prophecy. Prophecy brings the word of Hashem to the prophet. Mar'eh, the vision that he saw in a likeness, as in the case of the vision of the ram and the goat in the earlier chapter. All of this is now going to be explained in detail in our chapter 11 and the ensuing vision. As I've said repeatedly, chapters 10, 11, and 12 of Daniel are all one unit, divided into three parashiot in the text of the parchment text of Daniel, but essentially all the words of this angel coming to reveal to Daniel the end of time. And in verse 2, Daniel tells us that he had been mourning for shloisha shavuim yomim, for 3 sevenfold periods of days. Well, our classical commentators all take this to mean literally 21 days, which would be perhaps a simple and obvious pshat, a simple explanation of this verse. However, Rashi says differently. Rashi tells us that the period of Daniel's fasting was actually 21 years. And Rashi is taking the word yamim in the Hebrew text in the same sense in which it is used in Genesis, in the portion of Chayei Sarah, when Eliezer goes off to seek a wife for Isaac, for Yitzchak, and when he requests initially that Rivka should go back with him to Isaac, immediately her mother and her brother Laban say, let her stay here for a month, or yamim, where the Rashi on that verse in Genesis deduces that it must be speaking about the period of a year. From the context and the logic of their argument, it's referring to a period of a year. And that is where Rashi gets his teaching that Esrim ve'echod shana heim. They are 21 years. 18 years from the first year of Darius of Media, who had originally set his heart on, when Daniel initially set his heart on calculating the end of the 70 years of Daniel and the destruction and the exile, and in addition another 3 years. All of this is Daniel's 21 years. Now, it's quite understandable that a tzaddik on the level, the stature of Daniel would actually do such an extensive period of fasting. Nearer to our times, we've heard a little over 200 years ago the incredibly lengthy fasts that Rabbi Nachman of Breslov would endure, and similar cases have been known both in the more distant past and in the recent future of tzaddikim who considerably afflicted themselves in the world in order to reach levels of prophecy and devotion and to repair their generation and to repair the world. So it's not inconceivable that Daniel would have, as Rashi tells us, fasted for all of these 21 years. And in our text regarding Daniel's self-affliction, let me just point out that in chapter 10, verse 3, where it speaks about Daniel not eating fine bread. He would only eat, when he broke his fast in the evening, a very coarse bread. He drank no wine, he ate no meat. It also says that he did not anoint himself. And in ancient times, anointing oneself with oils and ointments was part of basic self-care. And I'm pointing up this at this moment because, God willing, we shall be coming to learn the Agadah, the Midrash in Tractate Yoma of the Talmud, speaking about this passage, and the tractate speaking about the laws of Yom Kippur gets into the subject by referencing our verse 3 here, with the concept of not anointing oneself as being a form of affliction, and one of the 5 afflictions that are practiced on the Day of Atonement, not anointing ourselves with ointments and oils. So to continue now with Malbim's discussion of the chapter, when it comes to, after all of this fasting, on the 24th day of the month, and Daniel is there by the river Tigris, as described in verse 4, he lifts up his eyes, and now he sees the one man garbed in the anointments, with his in the garments of linen, with his loins girded with fine gold, and his body like Tarshish, and his face like the appearance of lightning, and his eyes like flashing torches of fire, his arms and his legs like bronze, shining, flashing, and the voice of the sound of his words was like the sound of the howling winds and the great massive crowds and the seas. So here, speaking about the explanation of this figure who does appear to Daniel, verse 5, Malbim comments on levush badim, clothed in the linen clothes. These are the white linen garments indicating the complete cleanliness of this angel from physicality. And Malbim himself references the first chapter of Ezekiel, speaking about the loins of the angel and how they are girded, and he relates this to the chashmal that is spoken about from in the vision of Ezekiel, that from his loins and upwards there was a shining light shining, but it did not burn, and down below it was burning fire. And so the division between the angel's upper part and the angel's lower part, as depicted in the vision, Malbim is explaining that the upper part of the angel is the angel's power of receiving from above, which is the Kabbalistic aspect of Gedulah Chesed, where the angel rises up to receive the blessing. And now the lower part of the angel is concerned with bringing that shefa, bringing that influx of influence down to the lower worlds. And that is why the upper part of the angel is indicating the side of chesed, the angel's receiving power, and the lower part of the angel is indicating gevurah, the angel's handing down the influence according to the attribute of din, of judgment and measure, in order for the shefa, what is coming down, to be accessible and available to the recipients of it down below. So again, this indicates the aspect of tzimtzum we see in the very way that the angel is depicted here in verse 5 onwards. So his body being like Tarshish. What exactly is Tarshish? Well, the identity of Tarshish is as a great sea. We see Tarshish mentioned in the story of Jonah. Tarshish is sometimes associated with Spain. The Sea of Tarshish is almost certainly the Mediterranean. Rashi, in his commentary on this verse, tells us it is the Sea of Africa. Now, Africa in the language of our sages refers more specifically to North Africa, the Mediterranean Africa, as opposed to deeper down to the southeast, Kush, Ethiopia, and further down south in Africa would be an extension of what our sages called Africa. So Tarshish is pretty much the Mediterranean, which to us, when we look at it on a map, might seem to be like a big puddle between Europe and Africa, but certainly to the ancients, with only sailing boats to cross it, and it would have seemed like a most enormous sea. So the concept of the Tarshish is of this great expanse which has a sapphire-like shining nature like the sea. Says Malbim on verse 6 that his torso is like Tarshish, inasmuch as the angel is entering into material form and clothed with a clothing that enables him to be seen by humans. His garb is compared to a sapphire, like Tarshish, which is also the name of a sapphire stone, and likewise, says Malbim, in Hebrew, Sheken ha'avir ha'iter mar'eu kain. So the air, the ether, has this appearance. Now the face of the angel is like the appearance of flashing lightning, and his eyes like torches of fire. Here Malbim quotes Rav Yitzchok Abravanel that the attainment of in order to attain the disembodied separate intelligence, that it should be attained, this disembodied intelligence, the angel, should be attainable to human intelligence. It is compared to lightning flashing suddenly and then disappearing. Just like Rambam Maimonides speaks about in his introduction to the Moira Nevuchim, the guide for the perplexed. The Malbim continues commenting on the arms and legs having the appearance of flashing bronze. He says the actions of his hands and the movements of his legs, it's those actions that are alluded to in the depiction of his hands and legs. It's not that they are to be imagined as human-like arms and legs, but the actions which he performs and the movements which the angel makes in influencing our world are compared to hands and legs. And the expression of the flashing bronze is also is explained in the chariot, the vision of the chariot of Ezekiel. Again, of a similar concept of the mote velot mote, reaching but not reaching, of our ability to attain this beyond natural revelation. Daniel says that he himself saw, the people with him didn't see. Malbim here quotes that these were the prophets, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, who felt that something was going on and fell upon them trembling, because they were prophets, but they did not actually see the vision itself, because in respect of seeing the face of the angel, literally face to face, says Malbim, the Madrega, the level of Daniel was greater than his companions. And our sages commented that in this respect he was preferable to them in the level of his attainment. Now, Malbim, in the ensuing verses, verse 8, Daniel's response to this vision emphasizes how Daniel's physical powers were did not remain only the only thing that even his intellectual powers did not remain, to express the complete shock, horror, and completely earth-shaking nature of this to Daniel. And all of his levels were just blown away. And this is because in other prophecies we see that the prophet was less shattered than we find in the case of Daniel. Here, even his highest faculties were blown to bits at first, and he was not ready to receive the prophecy. And it's only that when he heard the voice, he got even weaker, he falls into a slumber, and it's only later, as I said, as the angel comes down level to level and gives him strength, he's able to get up and hear what the angel is saying. Now, verse 13, here the angel is already talking and giving the first opening part of his message to Daniel. Verse 12, the angel had said, "Don't fear, because from the first day that you began to try to understand and to fast, your words were heard, and now I have come." And in verse 13 he says that the whole verse has a certain glaring point staring you in the face when you recognize it. He starts off by saying that the Sar Malchus Poras, the angel, that is the heavenly guardian angel of Persia, is standing against me, says Gabriel, for 21 days, which is a long time in heavenly terms. And then he says there is Michael, one of the first and foremost of the guardian angels, namely the guardian angel of Israel, standing there above him, and he's coming to help me. And the last part of the verse, I was left there, says Gabriel, by the kings of Persia. So we start off with the angel standing against the guardian angel of Persia, Gabriel against the guardian angel of Persia. We end up the verse that the angel is there with the kings of Persia. And here Malbim explains this, that at the beginning of the verse, Gabriel had to stand against the angel of Persia, standing against him, because the angel of Persia was already raising accusations against what in the first year of Cyrus the Jews had begun to do in Jerusalem, to build the temple. And immediately after that there was the kitrug, there was the accusations and the letters of incitement of the sons of Haman coming from Israel, as written about in Ezra and Nehemiah. So all this is giving the Sar Paras, the angel of Paras, a power to make accusation against Israel. And as we shall discuss when we come to the Agadah in the Gemara, which I did mention yesterday, Gabriel's limitation in fighting against all this was because in the time of the destruction of Jerusalem, he had let the burning coals get cooler, and that was why he was, as it were, sent out of the heavenly tribunal. So here is at the beginning of our verse now, in verse 13, the angel of Persia standing up against Gabriel, and at the end of the verse we see that the angel is by the side of the kings of Persia. That is to say that Gabriel is now acting as a mashpia, says Malbim, acting as bringing down the influence of divine providence and management and government into the world, whether it's the angel himself who is standing by the kings of Persia, namely the coming kings, namely Darius, in order to accomplish a change of policy. Says Malbim, is now going to change their heart to show kindness to Israel, because through Gabriel the influence of accusation of the first angel will now diminish, the angel of Persia. So continues Malbim in his explanation of this chapter. He says to Daniel, verse 14, I've come to give you understanding of what will happen to your people at the end of days. Says Daniel, says Malbim, the implication here is that indeed, even though I shall be able to overcome the guardian angel of Persia, that is to in such a way that his kingship, his kingdom will be one full of kindness to Israel, as we see that after the miracle of Purim, after Achashverosh of Megillat Esther, when Darius the second came to the throne, Darius of Persia, the son of Esther, he did indeed actually enable the building of the temple. So this much, the building of the temple through turning Persia into a beneficent helper of Israel at that time, the angel could accomplish, but now he's coming to tell him that for Gabriel to stand against the kingdoms that are coming, he will not be able to overcome them, and that they will do harm to Israel, as we shall see in the prophecies in the coming chapter, chapter 11, leading up to the destruction of the first temple, and chapter 12 all the way up to the end of days, at the end of our present bitter exile. So the angel here in verses 14 on is telling us that he's coming to teach Daniel what is going to happen with these kingdoms that he will not be able to overcome. For he says there is yet a vision for these days. There is still another vision that has to come to you, namely chapters 11 and 12 of all the days that are to come. Now, after the angel has said this to Daniel, Daniel once again, at the prospect of hearing this terrible vision his soul already knows he's going to be given, he falls down again and again. The angel has to come down to him and has to strengthen him in order to give him the strength to hear such exalted prophecies, which says Malbim points out, are over such an extended period of time, so many far-off ages. And then Malbim continues with his commentary on verse 20. Verse 20, the angel says to Daniel, do you know why I have come to you? And now I'm going to go back to fight with the guardian angel of Persia, and I'm going out, and behold, the guardian angel of Greece is coming. So Malbim over here, as the angel had already indicated, there will be yet 3 more kings arising for Persia. And says the angel to these are Cyrus and Ahasuerus and Darius of Persia, and says the angel, I will have to fight with all of these in order to turn over their hearts to favor Israel. This alludes also then to the Purim miracle, where after the dire threat of annihilation to all the Jews, Ahasuerus was finally had a change of heart. This was, we're hearing here, coming from the angel Gabriel through God's providence over the world. And says the angel, I am going out, I will need to go out from any more being by these kings in order to send down an influence of good-heartedness and beneficence to Israel, for the angel of Greece is coming. And says Malbim, over there I will not be able to change their hearts to good and to overcome the guardian angel of Greece. And as our sages said on the concluding words of the concluding words of verse 21, I shall tell you what is inscribed in the script of truth. Says Daniel that this is the script of the divine decree that is written above. As our sages said, it is true that the decree has already been decreed, and this I cannot nullify. The angel cannot nullify the coming empire of Greece. And concludes the Malbim in his discussion of the closing verse of chapter 10, verse 21. He tells us, against the guardian angel of Greece, there's none that has sufficient power to give, to be able to overcome that guardian angel. And even I, who am giving them influence, now that the decree has been made, they're going to get divine help above to accomplish their empire. And the only one that can do anything about this, concludes the angel to Daniel, is Michael, your guardian angel, the guardian angel of Israel. Now, very importantly, Malbim explains here that Michael himself, inasmuch as he is the guardian angel of Israel, he alone is able to show providence to Israel, and Israel will not be able to have their salvation in any other way except through a miracle, not through some king, and not through overcoming the guardian angel of any temporal earthly king in order to turn his heart to good. Now the angel is concluding, telling Daniel, before he goes into the details of the prophecy, in the future you've got to understand it's only through miracle and wonder. For when Israel will be standing in very great trouble and literally standing facing complete destruction, then the guardian angel of Israel shall be aroused from God's aspect of his providential government of the world through miracles, as will be explained when we come to chapter 12. And with that, we conclude Malbim's commentary on our chapter, and we shall be coming in our next session to a discussion of the Talmud's Agadah on this chapter. So with that, we conclude today's study of Daniel. So now we'll take a brief interval before we come to studying our Mishnah. Shalom again, my dear friends. Shalom, and now let us commence the next session of our discussions today. Let me just get up for you, however, the correct reference to our Mishnah, since we are today starting a new tractate. We are today starting the tractate of Makot, and I would just like you to be able to have that in front of your eyes. And here we go, that's better. And before we will actually go into our Mishnah, we shall be studying some verses that relate to subjects which are necessary for us to understand what our Mishnah is talking about. Shalom. Today, the second day of the month of Elul of the year 5776, corresponding to the 5th of September in the year 2016. And we commence today our study of the tractate immediate following the tractate we have just completed, Tractate Sanhedrin, which is followed by Tractate Makois, as it is pronounced by Ashkenazim, or Makot by those using the Sephardi and Israeli pronunciation. Makois or Makot meaning literally blows, and referring to the punishment of lashes which is administered to somebody who contravenes, who violates certain of the Torah prohibitions. And we will actually only be coming to the subject of how the makot, the lashes, were administered in the third, which is the final chapter of our tractate. But in order to come to the subject of to whom and how the blows, the lashes, were administered, we first have to deal with certain borderline issues as to when and how the blows might be administered. The overall subject of the sanction of lashes is connected, of course, with the subject of Sanhedrin, because we have already dealt with the supreme authority of the Sanhedrin and their unique power to, in temple times, to administer the four kinds of execution entrusted to the Bet Din. And now, having dealt with the most severe sanction of the Torah, we come to the less severe but nevertheless very, very harsh penalty of lashes, which before a person would be given lashes, they would be given a medical assessment as to just how many lashes they might be able to endure without the lashes killing them. So we shall come to all that. But before we come to that subject, we must confront some of the issues related to these, as I've called them, borderline cases. And it's in this way that our tractate actually takes off from exactly where Tractate Sanhedrin at the end of chapter 11, Mishnah 6, ended, that in the case of false witnesses who accused a daughter of a Kohen priest of adultery, even though the Torah specifies that the Bat Kohen would be burned to death, in this case the false witnesses would not receive the same punishment as the daughter of the Kohen of burning. They will be executed by strangulation for trying to have her killed through false testimony. And the closing words of the last mission of Sanhedrin were that all false witnesses who testified against somebody falsely accusing them of a capital crime, they would go off to the same kind of execution as the person they tried to execute, with the exception of this case just mentioned of the false witnesses who gave testimony against the daughter of a Kohen having adultery with somebody else. Well, now, in order to discuss the subject of the Edim Zomamim, the false witnesses, we will first go into Deuteronomy in chapter 19, where the Chumash gives us the fundamental law of testimony and false testimony. It is here in the case of the discussion of testimony of witnesses in a bet din, in a rabbinical court, that we get introduced in the Torah to the concept of the false witnesses. As the Torah says in Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 15, Lo yakum eid echod beish. There shall not arise one witness against a person, lechol ovain, not for any transgression, lechol chatos, not for any sin. One witness alone cannot nail a person. Their testimony is not enough, not for any sin, b'chol chet asher yecheto, in any sin that the accused might sin. Al pi shnei edim, it is only through the mouth, through the testimony of two witnesses, a minimum of two. Oy al pi shleisha edim, or according to testimony of a group of three witnesses who all give matching testimony. Only then, yokum davor, shall there be established, shall there stand the matter. Only through the testimony of two or at least valid witnesses can a matter be determined in the bet din. And under normal circumstances, the bet din accepts the testimony of two kosher witnesses because, and we've discussed the way that the witnesses were subjected to examinations in the bet din in the earlier chapters of Sanhedrin. Continuing now with our passage in Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 16, now we come to the false witness, because actually the dayonim, the judges, cannot know if the witnesses are testifying truthfully or falsely, except either through careful examination of their testimony or through establishing that the witnesses were not where they alleged they were and could not have witnessed the event. Ki yokum eid chomos beish, when there shall arise a witness of violence, of aggressiveness, of robbery, an evil witness against a man, ba'ish, la'anois boy soro, to answer in him testimony that turns aside. The ninth commandment of the Ten Commandments is you shall not bear false testimony. And if there is a case where somebody is bearing false testimony, v'amdu shnehu anoshim asher lohem oriv b'fnei Adonai, there shall stand up the two men who have the argument, who have the conflict, the case between them. They shall stand up Lifnei Adonai, Lifnei HaKohanim V'Ashoftim, Asher Yehiyu B'Yomim Mohem. They shall stand up before the Lord in the presence of God, whose presence is in the court of the rabbis, before the priests and the judges, who will be the natural judges, the priests and the judges of the community. Asher Yehiyu B'Yomim Mohem, that will be in those days. This is talking about any Sanhedrin Ketana, a panel of 23 judges that is competent to judge capital cases. So having heard the testimony, V'dorshu ashiftim eitev, the judges must search out very well. We already studied in Sanhedrin how this is one of the verses that is the foundation for the various investigations and questions the judges had to ask. V'hinei eid sheker ho'eid. And if, behold, if it turns out it is a witness of falsehood, a false witness that this witness is bearing. Sheker ono v'ochiv. Falsehood did he answer against his brother, if this is established through the investigations of the judges. And this, in the case of Edim Zomamim, the treacherous false witnesses we should be studying about in Tractate Makos, this will be established if they're stepped forward or were brought forward two other kosher witnesses who testified that these first two were not where they said they were when they claimed to have witnessed the crime. And in that case, the false witnesses are established as Edim Zoimimim. And the Torah says, Va'asisem loi, you shall do to him, namely to the false witnesses, the false witness, ka'asher zomam, just as he planned. You shall inflict upon him the same thing that he plotted to inflict upon his fellow. La'asois la'ochiv, what he was intending to do to his brother. Uvi'arto horo mikirbecho, you shall clean out, remove the evil from within your midst. Vanishore mishmeu v'yiro, those who are left shall hear and shall be afraid. They shall not continue anymore to do like this evil thing in your midst. We already had a similar verse in the case of the false prophet who was, or the idolatrous prophet who was publicly executed, and we heard also about the Zokein Mamre, particularly the rebellious elder, of whose execution there had to be made a public announcement so that everybody would hear and be afraid. The same in the case of the Eid Zoimim, the false witness. This is one of the categories where public announcement of the execution of the punishment inflicted on this witness, tantamount to the punishment he wanted to inflict upon the other person. They shall no longer do this, anything like this evil thing in your midst. Your eye shall not take pity. Nefesh b'nefesh, soul for a soul, literally. Ayin b'ayin, eye for eye, literally. This is not the literal meaning of the text is not the way this is applied in the halacha, for reasons which are not relevant right now to our discussion. Shein b'shein, tooth for tooth, yad b'yad, hand for hand, regel b'regel, leg for leg. So this is the Torah portion about the Edim Zomamim, the false witnesses. And to complement this chapter, let us just before we go into our Mishnah, turn to a later portion of Deuteronomy. Now going to chapter 25 of Deuteronomy, in the portion of Kiseitze, which is going to touch upon the subject of Edim Zomamim, and is also going to serve as an introduction to the main subject of our tractate, Makos, lashes, because here is the Torah's source for the commandment of inflicting the lashes on certain kinds of transgressors. So Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 1, Ki yiyeh riv bein anoshim, when there will be a dispute between people. We just had that expression of riv, dispute, in the previous section, speaking about the false witnesses. V'nikshu el amishpot ushefatum, they shall draw close to the justice, and the judges shall pass judgment. V'hitzdiku es hatzadik, they shall deem righteous he that is righteous. V'hirshiu es orosho, they shall condemn and deem evil the one who is wicked. This verse in itself is where is the allusion to the Eid Zoimim, the treacherous false witness here, because the Hebrew expression hitzdiku es hatzadik, they shall deem righteous the righteous. Well, if it was righteous from the start and that was evident, they would not have to justify him. The reason they had to justify him was because they got up against him false witnesses who said this tzaddik, so-called, is actually rasha, he's wicked, and only after the Edim Zoimimim, the false witnesses, were themselves disproved, then the judges, hitstiku es hatzadik, they will now justify the righteous. V'hirshu es arosho, if the wicked person covered himself with false witnesses, the judges, through their investigations, should be able to condemn those false witnesses. V'hoyo im bin hakois orosho, and it shall be if literally a son or a child of being beaten shall be this wicked person. If the law provides that this case of transgression is one that to which is applicable the penalty of lashes, v'hipiloi ashofet, the judge shall cast him down. That is to say, we do not permit extrajudicial beatings, those which are undertaken on private initiatives. It is the judge who determines if the biblical penalty of lashes is applicable. The judge shall cause him to fall down. Vehikohu, they shall smite him, they shall give the lashes, as we shall learn how that was done through a leather straps. Lefonov, before the judges, this is carried out. Kedei rish osoi, in accordance with his evil, be mispor, within a given number. Arboim yakenu, 40 shall he strike him. Our sages ignore the break between the two words at the end of verse 2 and the first word of verse 3. Be mispor arboim, within the number of 40. Well, the number that is within 40 is 39. From here we learn that the penalty of lashes, unless mitigated for medical reasons, was 39 lashes. Within the number of 40, yakenu, shall he smite him, the officer in charge of the administering the penalty. Lo yosif, he shall not add. The person administering the punishment is not allowed to give one more lash than was determined, and if he gives one more lash, he himself is a criminal. Pen yosif lahakoisoi al ele makor rabo, lest the one that administrates the punishment might add to smite him over and above these mentioned 39 lashes with an excessive blow, an excessive punishment. V'niklo ochicho le'inecho, and your brother would be humiliated before your eyes. Even after the lashes are administered, he is still your brother. Having had the lashes, he returns to being your full brother. The lashes expurgate his sin. And the Torah mysteriously goes on in verse 4 with a different mitzvah. Leisachsom shor bedishoy, you shall not muzzle an ox while the ox is threshing. When the ox is out there in the threshing floor, treading on the stalks of produce of wheat, barley, and kitniot, legumes, beans, and so on, the Torah demands that the farmer working the ox allow the ox to eat from the crop that he is eating, that he is working on doing the threshing. The ox is treading on the ears of corn and causing the kernels to separate preliminary to the further processing of the kernels, and you're not allowed to muzzle the ox and prevent the ox from eating. Well, our sages learned from the smichut, the adjacency of the commandment about the lashes, and the commandment the prohibition not to muzzle the ox, which prohibits an action, that it is primarily the prohibitions whose violation involves some action that are punishable through the penalty of lashes. For example, if a person takes a garment mixed with linen and wool and wears it, if he takes the action of cooking meat and milk together and is duly warned by witnesses and carries on doing what he's doing despite their warning him that this is a sin punishable by lashes, he will be lashed because he's performing an action, and that is what we learn about from the smichut, the adjacency of the commandment not to muzzle the ox. So we have now had two passages in the 5 books of Moses, the book of Deuteronomy, which speak about issues relating to our new tractate of Makos, and the words of the first Mishnah of Makos, chapter 1, Mishnah 1, follow on immediately from the previous Masechta. The previous Masechta, the end of Sanhedrin, had just said to us that the exceptions to the law that the Eid Zoimim, the false witness, receives the same punishment as he wanted to impose on the other, is the testimony about adultery by the daughter of a Kohen, the daughter of a priest. And now the Mishnah asks, beginning of Makos, Ketzad ho'edim nasim zomimin. How would it be that the witnesses become zomimin, false witnesses? Well, this is not quite the question that the Mishnah is going to answer. How you disprove edim zomimim is by bringing other witnesses who prove that they were elsewhere. But now the Mishnah is going to go into a number of cases where the punishment that, or the penalty, or the hardship that the false witnesses wanted to impose on somebody else cannot be imposed upon them. Just as in the case of the daughter of the Kohen, the daughter of the priest that they accused of adultery. Keted or Edim Nasim Zomin, how would be a case of Edim Zomimin, of false witnesses? Me'idim onu v'ish peloini, shehu ven grusho, oy ven chalutzo. We, say the false witnesses, we are testifying against a certain Mr. So-and-so that he is the son of a divorced woman, or he is the son of a woman that underwent the ceremony of chalitzo, to release her from, after the death of her first husband without children, to release her from the obligation of entering into yibum, levirate marriage with the surviving brother of her departed husband. This is talking about a priest who is the son of a divorced woman, or the son of a woman that underwent the ceremony of chalitza, is ineligible to serve in the temple. He is now in the category of a halal, a desecrated ex-priest. He is not anymore in the holiness of a kohen, cannot serve in the temple, and all of his issue would also be halal. They would be desecrated priests. We cannot say that this false witness who accused wrongfully the Kohen of being the son of a divorced woman, or the son of a woman that underwent the chalitza ceremony, we cannot say that if that witness, whether he was a Kohen or not a Kohen, you couldn't turn him into the same status he wanted to have that other priest be in, because if he's not a priest at all, then the category of halal is not relevant to the Eid Zoimim. And even if he is a priest, depending on whether he does or does not have issue, if we determine that he's going to be a ben gerusha and chalutza, the penalty will not only affect the false witness, it will affect all the false witnesses' issue, his descendants, who will also be in the same category of halal. So we do not, in this case, also afflict the same suffering that he wanted to inflict upon the object of his false testimony. Elo loike arboim. He is going to undergo the penalty of lashes, 40 lashes. Calling them 40 lashes is the general way they're referred to, but as I've just explained, they were actually only ever administered 39 lashes. Another example of a false witness that you cannot punish as he wanted to punish the other person. Me'idin onu be'ish peloini shehu chayv legulois. We say, these false witnesses, we are testifying against Mr. So-and-so that he is liable to go into exile. They are testifying falsely that he committed unwitting manslaughter and would have to go into exile to the cities of exile. We don't say that this false witness is now going to go off into exile in place of him. We don't say such a thing. Elolika Arboim is going to undergo the 40 lashes. Likewise, another example. Me'idim onu beish ploini shegirish es ishtei velo nosan lo ksuboso. We, the false witnesses, are testifying against Mr. So-and-so that he divorced his wife, but he did not give her ksubo. That means that if a man divorces his wife under Torah law, under rabbinical law, he is required to give her a sum of money that he wrote into her original marriage document, her ksubo. And now they're claiming that he did not give the woman that he divorced this money. And the Mishnah says about this testimony, this false testimony, but surely either today or tomorrow, at some time in the future, in the end, he's going to give her ksubo. That is to say that even though he may not have divorced her yet, or he may not have given her the money, in the end, he's going to give her the ksuba money, either because he divorces her or because he dies, and according to Torah law, when a man dies before his wife, she receives her ksuba money as part of her settlement on his death. So what exactly did these false witnesses testify? They testified that they want to make this man lose out by claiming he didn't pay his wife the money, but in the end he's going to have to pay her anyway. So there is a limited damaging effect to their testimony. So here is the answer of the Mishnah to how we will calculate their penalty. Omdin kama odam reitza liten b'ksuboso shel zoi. We make an estimate, how much would a person be willing to give for the ksuba money of this woman? In other words, we're going to treat her ksuba document as a negotiable debt which the husband is liable to pay under certain circumstances. It's a debt that carries with it a certain risk. The risk is that if the woman dies before her husband, then the husband will keep the ksuba money. But if the husband dies before the woman, or if he divorces her, he will pay her the ksuba money. So we're going to treat this ksuba liability of the husband as a risky loan, which we're going to sell to somebody. In the event that this woman will be widowed or she gets divorced, then the purchaser of this document will receive his money. But the risk is, if, however, the woman dies before her husband will inherit her, and the person that purchased this document, this risky loan, will not get anything. So how much is a person prepared to pay for such a document? The person will assess the risks or the likelihood, depending upon the health of the man, the health of the woman, the state of affairs between them, and a person will estimate how much he would want to pay for such a document. That is the sum of money which it is deemed that the false witnesses caused the man who they claim that divorced his wife and didn't pay her the money. That is the punishment that is inflicted upon them. They're going to have to pay that sum. Another case, the last case of our Mishnah, Me'idin onu b'ish poloini shu chayav lechaveiro 1,000 zuz. We testify against Mr. So-and-so that we know that he owes to his fellow 1,000 zuz coins, with the condition of that loan that he's got to repay the loan to give them back to him sometime between now and 30 days. V'hu oimer, the borrower says, mikan v'ad 10 shonim, From now until 10 years, I have to repay this loan. In other words, the false witnesses are testifying against him that he has to repay the loan at a far more accelerated rate than the borrower claims. If they were exposed as false witnesses, Omdim, we now make an assessment to see how they're going to be penalized, these false witnesses. Kama odam roitza litein v'yu biyodoi 1,000 zuz. How much is a person willing to pay to secure a loan that he's going to have in his hand 1,000 zuz coins to play around with? Bein neiston mikan v'ad 30 yom. What is the differential if he receives a loan for 30 days? How much is he prepared to give to get a loan for only 30 days, as opposed to bein neiston mikan v'ad 10 shonim, or if he's giving it, going to receive the money as a loan for to be repaid only after 10 years? How much more is a person willing to pay for such an extension of time to get such a long-term loan? That is what the false witnesses are deemed to have caused in terms of loss to the person against whom they gave false testimony. And with that, we conclude. So with that, let us now take a brief interval, my dear friends, and conclude our Mishnah study for today, and in a short while to have some more words of inspiration for our time. Shalom, my dear friends. Shalom again, and back to our studies, to the closing part of our studies for today, with some words of Chassidut today from Rabbi Nachman. Yesterday, in my weekly Shavua Tov hookup, I spoke about the inner kavanot of the month of Elul, the inner spiritual intentions as we go on this journey towards the great aliyah, the great ascent of the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah, the day of judgment, and Yom Kippur, the day of atonement and complete reconciliation with God. And our pathway, as explained by Rabbi Nachman, as I elaborated yesterday, is learning the skill of dealing with the moment of the ascent when things are good, things are positive, you feel inspired, you feel enthusiastic, you have energy, you have health, learning how to use that moment to its full advantage. And the second kind of expertise, learning how to deal with when things are not in order, not in the order you would want them to be in. When you are beset with obstacles and opposition, how do you deal with that? Well, I would like just to share with you a short teaching out of Rabbi Nachman's Likutei Moran here in the towards the end of the first volume of the original Hebrew text, which is not identical with the first volume of the present-day Breslov Research Institute Likutei Moran translation, which is multi-volume. There are only 2 volumes of the Hebrew text, and I'm looking at the teaching in Reish Ayin Zayin 277, in which Rabbi Nachman tells us that when there is opposition against a person, when a person is facing difficulties and opposition from other people around him, he should not try to stand up against those who hate him and say, well, just what they're doing to me, I'm going to damn well do against them. Because, says Rabbi Nachman, this is just going to have the opposite consequence, that the person who is one's enemy is just going to, that way, is going to more easily come to what he's trying to attain to cause you problems. And he will indeed see in the person who tries to fight him head on, the opponent will see exactly what he wants to accomplish. On the contrary, says Rabbi Nachman, the way to deal with this opposition is to employ also here, even when a person is making trouble for you, to employ here the skill and the technique of judging everybody in the scale of merit. Try some way to look at them positively. Even try, says Rabbi Nachman, some way to see if there is some true favor, some true spiritual good you could do that person. That is the best way to deal with this opposition, for reasons he now begins to explain. He says it is fit to judge one's, even those that hate one, in the scale of merit, and to do them every kind of goodness, and to fulfill the words of the psalm, let my soul be like the earth to all. Just like the earth, that everybody is treading all over it, and the earth gives everyone every kinds of benefit, food and drink, gold, silver, precious stones, everything came from the earth. Likewise, even though people may be setting up in opposition to you and trying to actually do you harm, even so, if you will find some way to perform some favor to them, just like the earth, this will be like, as in a little parable, a homily that Rabbi Nachman now sets forth. Suppose some robber was trying to dig a hole in the ground under the wall of your enclosure in order to dig a tunnel down under to get inside and into your house. So if you inside you decide that the way to deal with this is to go tunneling through to him, then the person who's trying to tunnel in from the outside, the robber, will that way definitely get to what he's trying to accomplish, because you're simply doing the tunneling work from the inside for him. But if all the while that the robber on the outside is digging, and his fellow on the inside is standing there and pouring in more and more earth and making a huge mound against the person trying to tunnel in, the more he tunnels, the higher the mound on top. He'll never get up there. He'll never get through. And that way, the person on the inside is going to subvert and destroy the evil intent of the outside robber. He will not be able to accomplish what he wants. Likewise, the way to deal with people who hate you is not to try to stand against them and to harm them the way you would they would try, God forbid, to harm you. This is Israel and Jews everywhere right now are faced with every kind of enemy trying to destroy Israel. The amazing thing is that Israel provides everybody with all kinds of good things, with the latest medical equipment, with the latest agricultural equipment, desalination equipment, electronic communications equipment. They're doing everybody goodness, and everybody, all these worst enemies of Israel, all trying to institute boycott, divestment, etc. They actually, they themselves are using the elements of their computers and mobile phones, all made or produced originally in Israel. So he says this is the way to fight against those who hate you, that instead of trying to tunnel out towards them, you just pile on the earth, you do every kind of goodness. And that is the meaning of the verse, let my soul be as earth to all. And through this, the person is able to disrupt and destroy the intent of the person that hates them. And then, as the verse in Proverbs says, one who digs a pit, he himself will fall into it, because the person that wicked robber tried to harm is standing and just pouring on more and more earth over him and completely frustrating and thwarting his plans. And with that, my dear friend, we conclude today's studies. Let me just remind you that we will have sessions, God willing, not tomorrow, Tuesday, but on Wednesday and Thursday of this week. I will be sending out a notification, God willing, in the coming days about the coming program. There will be no studies next week, since I will be away from Jerusalem, away from my office and from my equipment to broadcast. I'm hoping that I will be back here on next coming Sunday a week, but I'll be giving you exact notification, God willing, if you're subscribed to the Kollel emails. With that, we wish those of you in United States a happy and enjoyable Labor Day holiday, and to everybody, Yom Tov U'Mevorach, a good and a blessed day. Shalom from Avram ben Yaakov here in the holy city of Jerusalem.